right, what's up, everybody? Cinephile Mike here, and I'm happy to be joined by Matt Branston, the writer, director, and producer of the short film Little Bug, making its HollyShorts Film Festival premiere. Set against the backdrop of the Soviet space program in 1957, Little Bug imagines the emotional story behind one of history's most famous missions as a scientist brings Laika, the first dog destined for space, home to meet his young daughter. Matt, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
So, where did the idea for Little Bug first come from? I mean, we all know the historical story of Laika, but what inspired you to imagine this deeply personal family story happening outside of the history books?
So I have always been interested in Laika. I love anything to do with space. I love films about space. And I was always reading stuff about her over the years. And then one day I just was like, I was working on a completely different project, and I read this true story, which the film is based on, which is that a scientist took her home because they all felt sorry for her and wanted to give her a chance at um some sort of a day of normalcy in this chaotic period for her. And then once I'd heard this idea, everything fell into place, and I just wrote the whole script down in one day. It just all like flowed out me so quickly, and it was so like present. This idea of the family and Leica being sort of the intersection of their grief and their trying to fix each other. It was so like stunning to me as the fact it was actually real. And so yeah, just it went from there, and I couldn't have predicted what would have happened, but I'm really proud of it, to be honest.
And one of the most unique choices with it, and this is something to really be proud of with it, which I loved. You told much of the story from Laika's point of view. So, how did that come in, and what did shooting from her perspective allow audiences to experience that maybe if you'd gone a different route wouldn't have?
So the honest answer for the reason I first thought of that is that dogs are expensive, and I thought it'd be really annoying to have one there for a day. Um, but then I think at that point I hadn't ever seen a film done in first person perspective. Now, obviously, Nickel Boys came out a few months after I had shot the film.
That's how it
And I
always
mean, what
happens.
what a film. Yeah, right. Um, but once we sort of talk about it, myself and the cinematographer Jake, we sort of realized the sort of the intimacy that it would create and the feeling that you were actually going through Leica's journey. And so rarely do you get the chance to like physically step into a character's footsteps or, pause. And it felt like such an opportunity to really delve into her and give you the feeling of reality. And also it had the side effect that I remember when I was like 8 or 9 years old, I would always talk to my dog, and I would sort of like treat my dog as a therapist. And it felt like there are times where you can speak to an animal in a way that you could never speak to a person, and you could tell them truths that you could never sort of feel safe to tell anyone else. And for me, the idea that these characters would be able to speak to the dog but not speak to their own family was such a powerful symbol for like the isolation they were going
Yeah.
through. And so it was just something that I felt, yeah, again, once we thought of it, it just had to be part of the story.
And what were your conversations like? So when you were working with Martin Freeman and Alexandra Barredo, who give these wonderful performances in this short time, about, you know, creating those moments with Leica and what that was like and how it would be worked on from the acting perspective.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where, I mean, we got really lucky in a way. Obviously, we're lucky that Martin agreed to do it. And with any film, like the most important thing for a director is casting. And
Hmm.
we just got the two, I can't imagine two actors who could have done a better job with the script. To the point where they were never, we didn't do any rehearsal, we shot the whole thing in one day. We
Oh,
never
wow.
really, thank you, I know, right?
That's impressive.
Um, we never had a huge discussion of like how do you make the dog feel real. They were just so present in the moment, and they were so present with the scene that they were able to just tackle it straight away and get to it. And there were moments like with Martin, the first time I spoke to him over the phone, he his big note to me, which was actually a really great suggestion, is he basically said never shoot from the floor up because it's the worst possible angle for an actor.
Ah, that's
Which is
true.
obviously right, and just like pure nostrils is not a good look. But once we started sort of like blocking out the scenes, or once I started blocking them out in my head, There was never really a reason for Leica to be on the floor. She's always on like a table or a chair or like on the steps or on like the seat of a car. So it's never really like you never really get that perspective. And then in terms of the acting, what I really loved about working with them is I would give them notes and I would sort of like talk through the scenes with them. But they would just bring so much complexity and depth by themselves that I never even thought of. So like with Martin, there was a moment where do you know the scene on the staircase where like has just been brought into the house and they start having an argument about how um they're being treated or how they're treating Leica. And I was speaking to Martin about that, and I always imagined him like feeling this deep sadness that he couldn't connect with his daughter. And he thought there was like an anger that she couldn't understand what he was going through. And for me, that was such a moment of like of brilliance for him because it wasn't that he was rejecting the sadness, it was just that he thought there was so much more to play. And I think that was the joy of working with these two actors is they had so much depth and complexity I couldn't even think of. And they brought so much to the roles, and I was so proud of them for that.
And in putting this together, and it's interesting because we talked about the point of view, our vision, dog's vision, when we look, like we see everything in this wide scope, right? Almost panoramic scope. But you chose to shoot the film in like a 4:3 aspect ratio, which
Mm.
already, evokes a different era. So what made framing it feel like that was the right choice for
You know,
this
there was a
story?
little there was a little part of me that so everyone thinks dogs see in black and white, and they don't. They see in like I think yellow and purple or something like that, yellow and blue. And there was a little part of me that thought, would it be really interesting to shoot the film entirely in like, yellow and blue? And I realized it would look absolutely ugly. Um, and yeah, you're right. Like they see I think their vision's even wider than humans.
Yeah.
So again, it was like it would make sense to do it like 255 even, or like honestly three maybe. Um, but for me, it was this sense of era and it was a sense of capturing
Right.
what was going on in the moment. So we were looking at like Tarkovsky movies and like Soviet films of the 1950s and Soviet television. And we realized that when the average person thinks of the space race, they either think of huge Hollywood blockbusters like Apollo 13 or First Man, which I mean First Man's 4-3, I think. But they think of things being wide scope, or they think of seeing it on TV. You know, when Neil Armstrong walked on the moon,
Right.
everyone would have seen it in 4:3. And so to me, it felt like a way of capturing how people would have thought about Leica at the time to do it in that sort of very square aspect ratio. And it further sort of created this feeling for me of her being trapped and sort of like destiny coming for her, where the tighter the frame and the tighter everything is the sort of the narrower her future becomes throughout the film. And so it's sort of a real coming together, like melding of concepts that I think really worked out for our like visual imagery in the film.
And speaking of that imagery, and when we were watching, well, I wasn't watching. I'm not that old. Sorry, but my parents were watching that on the space race. My grandmother. Um, you also kind of wove some of the archival footage within the film. So I'm curious to know how you and your editor Olivier Jones approached blending the historical images with your own footage to really tell a seamless story. How did you go about like balancing it where it wouldn't overshadow your story but feel a part of it?
You know, I think that's a great question because basically we initially hadn't planned on that. The script is written in the sense of like it's the full day, and there's elements of non-linearity, but it's mostly a linear story. And when we were in the edit, we just felt like it wasn't capturing the depth of what happened to Leica. And so initially we started trying it, me and Olive, with that's a nickname. His name is Olivier. Um we tried it with sorry, how do I say like a countdown. So basically the whole first 6 or 7 minutes of the film was
Mhm.
going to be a countdown to Leica's launch. And you would slowly hear 10, 9, 8, closer and closer. And then once we started playing around with that and playing around with stock footage, we realized how much power there was to this feeling of like to me, the film almost exists as like her flashback of memories before she's sent into space,
Right.
and then her using that to cope with what's going on and sort of the terror that she's feeling and like the sheer fear of being locked away in a spaceship and being sent off to somewhere she could never imagine. Um, so I think Olive really sort of nailed the emotion there. And I also think one of the things that we tried with that is it was something I heard Eddie Hamilton talk about when he was doing the Mission Impossible movies, editing them, is he would edit without sound so that you can watch
Mm.
it and just the images would make the film work for you. And once we tried doing that, we had tried editing to like classic tracks because the composer hadn't come on board yet. Um, and then we realized once we turned off any music and we just said, what are the pictures that tell this story? Is when we felt this huge sense of like linearity within the non-linear nature of the film. And so it told that complete story of Laika without feeling like we had to return to different things, you know.
Nice. And as Little Bug now begins its festival journey and moves forward, what would you say is one best practice that you learned on this that you look forward into carrying into your next project? And on the other side of that, was there a learning curve during production that changed how you'll approach things moving forward?
I think the lesson that I continually learn with every film is that you just have to find people you really trust and trust them to do their jobs. The way I always explain it, and I think this is incredibly pretentious of me, is that like I think the director is more of like a coach than the player.
Hmm.
Like it's our job sort of like to give the framework of the film, and then the actors, the cinematographers, they're the ones who actually do the thing. Like realistically, a director can make a film and never actually make a single thing happen on screen. And I'm sure like if you think of someone like Steven Spielberg, I doubt he does ever like truly make something happen. But in how you talk to the actors, how you talk to the camera operator, all these things come together. And I think what I learned is that like the more you have these people you trust and people you rely on, is the whole thing just flows better and all the ideas that you want to put into the film become real, rather than when you work with people who you don't know as well or don't trust as much, things can sort of get caught up. And so that would be like the one piece of advice, and the one advice that I'll take forward for my next film is always find people you trust and trust them. Um,
Nice.
and the second question,
The
I
learning curve,
forgot.
what you might try to
Learning curve.
sidestep.
Um, I think that I mean, we wrapped early on this film. Like we did like it was a 1 day shoot. We only shot for about 8 or 9 hours.
Mhm.
Um, I think stress testing the script more would be my thing. In the
Okay.
past, I've been very lucky that basically the scripts I've written have been translated pretty much directly onto the screen. And
Hmm.
part of that is that I write in a very edity style, so I
Hmm.
put in cuts and stuff like that. With this film, I think because the story read really good on screen, on page, I didn't necessarily stress test it enough. And so there were elements of stuff that we had to fix, that Olive and I had to fix in post, that realistically should have been thought through more. But I don't think that's necessarily a symptom of like our failures as like writer, director, producer, like filmmakers. I think that's a failure of um sort of time that we had to make the film.
Hmm.
And maybe a longer reproduction process would have saved us a bit more there.
And one last question before I have to let you go. When audiences leave Little Bug, what's one feeling or idea you hope stays with them long after the credits roll?
Oh, that's a really beautiful question. I think that for me, it's that I kind of hope the next time they look up at the stars, they find something beautiful in them and they think of people they love and they think of the connections they have and they can smile, and even if there's some sadness in there, they can find some joy as well.
Oh, beautifully said. Well, Matt, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today, and congratulations on Little Bug. Everyone watching, if you are attending the HollyShorts Film Festival, make sure you check out Little Bug during its run. We will include the screening information and how you can get tickets in the notes below, and also social media information about the film and its team. If you enjoyed this conversation that I had with Matt and want to make sure you see more, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and check out my website, cinephilemike.com, for more filmmaker interviews, reviews, and other great cinematic content. You can find me on all the socials. But until next time, this is Cinephile Mike reminding you to take a break and watch something new. Matt, have a wonderful day.
Thank you. You too.